Alex had always been a man of quiet demeanor, finding solace in the solitude of his thoughts. His career, once thriving in the fast-paced world of finance, came to a crashing halt when a scandal erupted, leveling him into a state of professional and personal ruin. The accusations, though ultimately proven false, left Alex's reputation in tatters, casting a shadow over every opportunity that came his way. The weight of the scandal was suffocating, driving Alex to seek refuge in the wilderness. He chose a secluded national park, not for its beauty, but for its isolation, a place where he could disappear, hidden from the prying eyes of a world that had turned its back on him. The park, desolate during the off-season, became his sanctuary, a retreat where he could rebuild himself. Prepared for the journey, Alex packed meticulously, filling his backpack with provisions and essentials. His mind, however, was not at rest. The scandal had left psychological scars, making it difficult to trust others or find comfort in social interactions. Solitude seemed like his only refuge, a place where he could confront his fears and attempt to rebuild his sense of self. Once in the park, Alex set up camp with meticulous attention to detail, erecting a sturdy tent and ensuring every corner was secure. He chose a spot that offered a clear view of the surrounding woods, aware of the need for vigilance despite his isolation. The cold night air bit sharply as he settled by the campfire, the flames casting flickering shadows on the trees. Alex had always found comfort in the quietness of nature, the rustle of leaves, and the distant calls of wildlife, providing a familiar, grounding rhythm to his days. Sitting there, he felt a strange sense of peace, a fleeting respite from the chaos of his life. As night settled over the forest, Alex's thoughts drifted to the reason he was there. He wasn't just escaping the world, he was trying to escape himself, hoping to find clarity and healing in the solitude of the wilderness. The campfire crackled softly, its light dancing across the trees as Alex gazed into the distance, wondering what lay ahead. It was in this moment of introspection that the first text arrived, shattering the illusion of peace. The unknown number's message, "How's your camping trip?" was both a disruption and an eerie reminder of the world outside, the one that had shattered his life. Alex exhaled sharply, his breath visible in the cool evening air, as he glanced around, half expecting to see a figure lurking in the shadows. The text could be a prank, a cruel twist from someone seeking to torment him further, or perhaps a genuine concern from someone who cared. But given his current state of mind, it was hard to distinguish reality from paranoia. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched by someone out there, maybe even a part of himself, waiting in the darkness. Alex typed a brief reply, "Who is this?" hoping to dismiss the message as a false alarm. The fire crackled in response, its sound echoing through the vastness of the night as Alex tried to focus on roasting a sausage over the flames. The act of cooking became almost ritualistic, a way to ground himself amidst the growing unease. As he bit into the cooked sausage, a strange warmth filled his chest, a momentary solace from the weight of his thoughts. But then, another vibration came. "It's beautiful out here." And for a fleeting moment, Alex felt a pang of envy, wishing he could fully embrace the beauty of his surroundings. But as he set aside the phone, the reality of his situation settled in once more. He was there to escape, but escape from what? From the ghosts of his past or from the shadows that seemed to linger in the woods. The night stretched on, and Alex sat by the campfire, his gaze fixed on the trees as he waited for whatever was coming next, a moment he hadn't asked for, but one he couldn't escape. The forest, with its silent watchfulness, seemed to hold the answer, a promise of unknown terrors waiting in the dark. Alex exhaled and shook his head, forcing himself to focus on roasting a sausage over the flames. He had come here to escape, to disappear, if only for a while. Let the ghosts of his past stay where they belonged. Then, another vibration. Unknown number. "It's beautiful out here." Alex froze. His breath hitched in his throat as he read the words. This wasn't a joke from someone back home. Someone was here. Heart pounding, he grabbed his flashlight and swept the beam through the darkness beyond the fire's reach. The trees stood silent, unyielding. No movement. No footprints marred the snow, except for a thin layer of frost covering the ground. And yet, a suffocating presence pressed against his senses. A third text arrived. Unknown number. I see why you chose this spot. Alex's stomach clenched. He shoved his phone into his jacket pocket and stood, his breath coming fast and shallow. The fire suddenly felt like a beacon, illuminating him for whoever or whatever was watching. Slowly, he moved toward his tent, one hand gripping the knife tucked into his belt. He barely made it inside before another vibration. Unknown number. Good night, Alex. His body went rigid. He hadn't told anyone where he was going. Hadn't even checked in at the ranger station. The only sound was the wind whispering through the trees. Then came the crunch of footsteps on frost. Alex held his breath, gripping the knife so tightly his knuckles ached. The footsteps stopped just outside the tent. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken threats. Then, a flash of light illuminated the fabric, brief, like a camera shutter clicking in the darkness. His phone vibrated again. A picture message. Hands shaking, Alex unlocked his phone. His stomach dropped. The photo was of his tent, taken from only a few feet away. Beneath it, a final message. Unknown number. Sweet dreams. Alex woke to the sound of his own shallow breathing, heavy with fear. The tent was still there. Everything was still there, but the air felt heavier, as if the weight of whatever was watching pressed down on him. He sat up carefully, his knife now in hand. The first light of dawn filtered through the trees, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. A soft rustle outside the tent sent Alex's heart racing. He held his breath, listening for any sound. Nothing, but he knew he wasn't alone. The memory of the phone messages played in his mind, a constant hum of unease. He had to leave now. But how? The park was vast, and he didn't know where he was exactly. The map on his phone showed him deep within the wilderness, miles from any main road. He pulled on his boots, his hands trembling as he secured the tent. The zipper made a grating sound that echoed in his ears as he stepped outside. The cold hit him like a punch. The air was sharp, carrying the faint scent of pine and something else, something metallic, like blood. Alex scanned the area, his flashlight sweeping over the snow-draped trees and the patches of ground visible between his feet. No footprints marred the surface. Just the occasional creak of the forest as if something were watching, waiting. A shiver ran down his spine, but he kept moving, his knife at the ready. Alex trudged deeper into the forest, each step sinking into the snow that clung to his boots, dragging him further in. The weight of the backpack bore down on his shoulders, a relentless burden of necessity. Yet, an unyielding determination drove him forward, propelling him away from the oppressive silence that felt almost sentient, pressing in from all sides. The forest stood eerily still, its quiet so absolute that it seemed to vibrate with an unseen energy. A faint hum lingered in the air, resonating through his bones, setting every nerve on edge. It was a presence, primal, watchful, and unmistakably malevolent. As his eyes closed, the hum swelled, threading through his veins like an eerie pulse. The trees contorted into grotesque shapes, their outlines distorting into something unrecognizable. Colors bled and merged, transforming the world into a shifting kaleidoscope of unease. When his eyes opened, he stood in a clearing that defied reason, a place where shadows moved independent of the wind, and light flickered as if alive. The landscape was both familiar and alien, a reflection of something long buried in memory. Alex sank to his knees, trembling at the edge of comprehension. Fragments of the past surfaced, a child standing in this very spot, filled with wonder instead of fear. The forest had once been a place of magic, but that time had long passed. A whisper echoed through his mind, the words of the silent watcher. "You have been here before." The realization struck deep, unraveling the fragile threads of reality. Was this a hallucination, the byproduct of exhaustion, or something far more sinister? With shaky resolve, he forced himself to rise, pressing forward toward an unknown fate. The silence clung to him like a shadow, its weight growing heavier with every step. Muscles coiled with tension, an unshakable premonition warning of what lurked ahead. The forest watched, patient and unrelenting, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And as Alex moved deeper into its grasp, the fear within him grew, an unspoken scream reverberating through the depths of his mind. Alex spent the remainder of the day in a daze, his thoughts churning between fear and disbelief. The rational part of his mind screamed for him to reject what he had seen, to dismiss it as exhaustion, paranoia, anything but the truth. But denial was no longer an option. The truth loomed over him, undeniable and insidious. The Silent Watcher wasn't just an urban legend whispered around campfires. It wasn't a ghost story to scare travelers into sticking to the roads. It was real. And worse, it was watching him. He had to leave. Now. But how? The forest stretched endlessly around him, a labyrinth of ancient trees and twisting paths. Every step felt like walking in circles, as if something unseen was guiding him deeper instead of letting him go. The air thickened with a pressure he couldn't explain, an invisible weight pressing against his chest. As night fell, the forest stirred, not with the familiar rustling of nocturnal creatures, but with sounds that didn't belong. A low hum vibrated through the trees, growing louder, pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark. It wasn't just noise. It was voices. Whispers. Alex pressed himself against a tree, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he tried to focus. He needed to move. He needed to run. The snow clung to his boots, dragging at him with every step. The trees pressed in, their skeletal branches reaching like clawed fingers, distorting in the periphery of his vision. His breath fogged in the icy air as he broke into a sprint, his only thought to reach the car. The vehicle was where he left it, partially buried in the snow. His fingers fumbled with the keys, trembling so badly he could barely slot them into the ignition. The engine roared to life. Relief slammed into him until he saw it. A note, pinned beneath the windshield wiper. "You can't leave." His stomach twisted violently. The words weren't just a warning. They were a promise. Gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled desperation, Alex pressed the accelerator, sending the car lurching forward. The tires kicked up slush, the road ahead stretching into darkness. He had no destination, just the overwhelming need to escape. Then pain. Sharp. Sudden. Impossible to be real. His chest constricted, his vision swam, and the world tilted. Darkness swallowed him whole. Alex woke with snow beneath him, the icy bites seeping through his clothes. His body ached, limbs sluggish and heavy, as if he had been lying there for hours. The scent of pine filled his nose, mingling with something metallic. Blood? No. His breath hitched as he sat up, the world tilting sickeningly. His hands sank into the frost-covered ground. Something was wrong. He looked ahead, and his stomach dropped. The tent. Standing exactly as it had when he left. His heart pounded in his chest, a rhythmic, hollow thud that barely felt like his own. The last thing he remembered was the road, wet pavement stretching into the dark, headlights cutting through the mist, the deafening screech of tires as the world turned sideways. Then impact. A flash of shattered glass. The violent jerk of his body as metal twisted around him. A sound, distant and muffled, like the ocean roaring in his ears. And then, nothing. But now he was here. The forest surrounded him, its silence thick and unnatural. Snow clung to his skin, seeping through his clothes, but he barely felt the cold. His limbs were sluggish, as though he had been lying in the frost for hours, maybe longer. His pocket vibrated. The sound echoed too loudly, sharp, and intrusive. With trembling hands, he fished out his phone, fingers stiff and uncooperative. The screen flickered to life, illuminating the darkness with a pale, ghostly glow. A new message. "Welcome back." The words sent a slow, creeping dread through his veins. His breath came in short, uneven bursts. The phone felt weightless in his grip, like it wasn't really there, or maybe, like he wasn't. His mind reeled, grasping at fractured memories, trying to bridge the impossible gap between then and now. He had been driving. He had been in a car. He had crashed. So why was he here? The silent watcher wasn't something he could outrun. It had been waiting for him, and now it had him. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their twisted limbs casting warped shadows that seemed to shift without wind. The whispers in the distance were no longer distant. He wasn't sure how long he had been here. He wasn't sure if he had ever truly left. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going anywhere. Not forward, not back. He was trapped, lingering in the space between, held in a place where the living didn't belong. And so he waited. For the next message. For the next cruel twist of fate. For the moment the watcher would call again. Because this was his life now, if it could even be called that.